Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's #2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Friday everybody. This week, the US Indo-Pacific Command published a video of, quote, a People's Republic of China J-16 fighter pilot performing an unnecessarily aggressive maneuver during the intercept of a US Air Force RC-135 aircraft. The PRC pilot flew directly in front of the nose of the RC-135, forcing the US aircraft to fly through its wake turbulence. The RC-135 was conducting safe and routine operations over the South China Sea in international airspace in accordance with international law. End quote. The same day, US media outlet Bloomberg reported, citing an unnamed senior US defense official, that the Pentagon doesn't believe these incidents are the result of Chinese pilots operating independently, but rather, quote, the latest intercept is part of a broader pattern across the South China Sea, the East China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, and elsewhere. End quote. Why is this important and how Washington and Beijing view it so important? Because the highest risk of war breaking out between the US and China is likely not in response to a calculated move from either capital, but rather a military accident in the East or South China Sea escalating into a crisis. Accidents, after all, have happened in the past, but unlike in the past, now US-China relations are so bad and communications, guardrails and de-escalation mechanisms so poor that the risk of crisis or war in the event of military accident is much higher. So, how has Beijing responded to the release of this video and Washington's concerns? On Wednesday this week, Colonel Zhang Nandong, spokesman for the Southern Theater Command, expressed that, quote, on May 26th, during a routine trading exercise in the South China Sea, a US RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft deliberately intruded into our training area to conduct reconnaissance and interference. The actions of the US side seriously undermined regional peace and stability. US reports ignore the facts and were entirely baseless, attempting to distort the truth and shift blame in an effort to confuse international public opinion. End quote. Thus, Beijing's response does not deny that the planes were in international airspace, but argue instead that the PLA had a right to act as they did because they believed that the US plane was too close to the PRC. Since the incident, Chinese state-run media has been throbbing with nationalist excitement too. It's important once again that we examine the information environment in which Chinese decision-makers are living in. A few quick tastes should give us an idea of the general flavor. For example, state-run CGTN expressed on Wednesday, quote, for a long time the US has frequently deployed aircraft and vessels in close reconnaissance on China, which poses a serious danger to China's national sovereignty and security. The US must stop such dangerous provocations. China will continue to take necessary measures to resolutely defend its sovereignty and security. End quote. State-run Xinhua, in an editorial the same day, writes, quote, this is all just US propaganda, likely aimed at providing material to label China as being irresponsible and a regional threat at the upcoming Shangri-La dialogue. End quote. However, one line from a separate report the next day is especially incredible. Quote, judging from the video, the Chinese fighter jet did an outstanding job professionally in sending a warning to the US spy plane without risking a collision, a Beijing-based military expert who requested anonymity told us. End quote. And this is from an English-language report, suggesting that the state-run outlet intended it for an international audience. The Shangri-La Dialogue, a major defense forum in the Asia-Pacific region, started today, Friday, in Singapore, and will continue to this Sunday. We will discuss the meeting over the weekend. On Monday this week, the US Defense Department said that Beijing had turned down a request from the US to arrange a meeting between Chinese and US defense chiefs at the event, a critical opportunity for the two to form a bridge of communication. In response, a Chinese Defense Ministry spokesperson said in a statement on Wednesday, quote, the US is responsible for all the current challenges, as it is creating obstacles and sabotaging mutual trust. It should show sincerity with actions to create conditions for communication. End quote. We are certainly living in very dangerous times. Next up, the Chinese economy. Hey guys, if you enjoyed today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit that like button. Sharing and subscribing is a huge help as well. It's only me making these episodes every day. It's a lot of work, but your guys' support is a huge source of motivation, so thank you very much. As always, anyone who can go that extra mile and help keep the channel sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. There is also the super thanks function in YouTube itself. As always, thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. China's national conversation about its record-breaking official levels of youth unemployment continues this week, and while some say that the problem will pass after a painful transition, other Chinese analysts are now also arguing that the issue may be worse than previously feared. One particularly shocking report was published yesterday by a Beijing-based analyst, Wang Mingyuan. We have already unpacked the details surrounding China's youth unemployment situation in previous videos. For today, let's just examine some of Wang's report. Wang writes that the difference between the annual increase in employment and the number of graduates from 2020 through 2023 was negative 2.5 million, negative 2.2 million, negative 4.5 million, and negative 5.8 million respectively. Quote, "This means that over 15 million new graduates in these years were unable to find jobs." End quote. Over the last 3 years, Wang continues, the average number of employees in A-share-listed companies has decreased by 12%. The company cancellation rate last year was approximately 10%, which means that roughly 10% of employees face layoffs or unemployment challenges. This translates to about 21 million young people. In addition, quote, "Since the outbreak of the pandemic, over 8 million young migrant workers have returned home due to unemployment. The cumulative number of unemployed young people, aged 16 to 40, over the past 3 years is about 54 million. Of course, a considerable portion of them have since found employment or engaged in flexible employment." End quote. With the further increase in the scale of college entrance examinations and graduate admissions, the number of graduates in China will increase by an additional 3 million by 2025 compared to 2022. Reaching a total of nearly 20 million. Then, Wang makes the report's most concerning observations. Quote, "The employment situation will become even more severe. In general, from now until 2030 will be the most challenging period for employment since China's reform and opening up. It not only requires addressing the unemployment stock over the past 3 years, but also facing the fact that urban employment demand will reach its historic peak. The employment dilemma will be more prominent than ever before." End quote. Adding, with no small degree of bravery, quote, "The current difficulty in employment is mainly due to setbacks encountered by the private economy." End quote. China has hosted several high-profile American leaders of industry this week, most notably, as we have seen, Tesla's Elon Musk, but also the CEOs of JP Morgan and Starbucks. Musk met with China's foreign minister earlier this week, then a vice premier, as well as the Chinese commerce minister on Wednesday afternoon in Beijing. The CEO of America's largest bank was also in China this week for its annual Global China Summit in Shanghai. On Wednesday, he said that JP Morgan was here to stay in China and that while the situation is, quote, "far more complex now, it will take years for this thing to take place, but it won't be a decoupling and the world will go on." End quote. Meanwhile, in his first visit to China as Starbucks' CEO, Narasimhan said his company would continue to develop the Chinese market, telling Chinese media outlet The Paper in an interview earlier this week, quote, "The Chinese market will become even bigger in the next 3 years. Our goal of having 9,000 stores in China by 2025 is just the beginning." End quote. The meetings and visits from these CEOs, especially Musk, has been great for Beijing's messaging, not just about being open for business, but also in relation to international narrative battles. For example, we have this from a blog affiliated with the flagship party newspaper, The People's Daily. Quote, "Decoupling from China means decoupling from opportunity.
decoupling from the future. Even if the White House agrees with arguments for decoupling, the Musks of the world do not agree." End quote. State-run Global Times in English wrote yesterday too, quote, "Musk's visit to China not only indicates that solid trade and economic cooperation between China and the US is an irreversible trend, but also demonstrates foreign companies' trust in China's business environment and promising development prospects, despite Washington's reckless technology decoupling maneuvers." End quote. And of course, these meetings also have political value for Beijing too. Quote, "This courting of top US business leaders may also be seen as useful by PRC officials, as they may return to the US and perhaps pressure politicians to ease up on China and adjust policies to re-engage with the PRC." End quote. That is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a great Friday. I hope you have a good weekend ahead too. I will see you all tomorrow.